Hello, everyone. It's been quite some time now since I've done an update on COVID, and that's because, at least in terms of vaccinations and here in the United States, not very much had changed until now. As most of you know, in the United States, just recently, the Food and Drug Administration granted the so-called emergency use authorization for Pfizer and Moderna to put out new boosters that target not just the original COVID virus, but the most common variants that are running rampant in the United States right now. That's the Omicron BA4 and BA5. Virtually all the COVID infections that are occurring in the United States in the last 3 months, maybe, are BA4 or BA5. These are variants of Omicron. So these just came out. Just one pharmacy in my town has them right now. Other pharmacies will be getting them very shortly. Pfizer's version is approved for anybody 12 years old or older. Moderna's is approved for anybody 18 years or older. And that's not to say that the Moderna one is more dangerous than Pfizer for kids between 12 and 17. It probably just means that Moderna's study that they submitted to the FDA was using 18 and older. Then you don't have to worry about getting parental consent and other things. So Pfizer has probably made the most money on their vaccine. They sold the largest number of doses. They maybe recruited more people, including these kids between 12 and 17. So anyhow, they got approved. Pfizer for 12 and older, Moderna 18 and older. The requirements to be eligible, it has to have been at least 2 months since you got a booster before. Not too many people want to run out and get another booster if they just had one 6 weeks ago or something. So that won't surprise most people, I don't think. And you have to have had your primary vaccination completed, which was the 2-dose Moderna or the 2-dose Pfizer or the 1-dose Johnson and Johnson originally. If you, for kids that are under age 12, if it's been 5 months or more since they got vaccinated and you wanted to vaccinate them again for this coming school year or something, they just have to take the same vaccine they got, the original vaccine. They haven't approved this new one yet with targeting BA4, BA5, but they can get a booster of the original vaccine. Probably later, they'll be approved to get this newer vaccine as well, but not yet. So let me talk first about getting the booster, and then I'll talk more generally about the situation. When I heard that it was in town, I got an appointment and I went the same day. I got my booster yesterday morning. And how was it? Well, I got the Pfizer. So this is second time or third, starting to lose count now. I think that was the second Pfizer one that I've gotten. And originally I got Johnson & Johnson. So the only one I haven't had yet is a Moderna. I was pleased to see that it was a very small needle to give this booster, almost like an insulin needle. So it didn't go in very far, and I hardly felt it. I mean, it was much easier than getting a blood draw, say. Hardly felt it. Or they put a bandage on afterwards. They made me wait 15 minutes. I was just going to leave, actually, because I'm ornery like that. But they weren't going to give me my completed vaccination card saying I got this dose. until I waited the 15 minutes. So I did have to sit there and wait and get my vaccination card back. Later in the afternoon, I had a little headache, but I don't know if that had anything to do with the vaccine or not. We had smoke in the air here because there's several wildfires, forest fires, both in the north and the south of us. So there was smoke in the air. It might have been that. It might have been because I hadn't eaten for a while. I don't know. I took 2 Advil. It went away. I didn't think anymore about it. And then when I went to bed, if I rolled over on that shoulder, you know, I felt, oh yeah, I got a vaccination there. It's just a little bit sore. But I mean, unless I laid right on that vaccination site, I didn't even feel I didn't even feel the vaccination site. My arm feels totally normal today. It's not bothering me in the slightest. And I don't have any side effects at all today. I mean, I can't say that I had any side effects, period, except the very slight tenderness at the injection site, which was hardly worth mentioning. In general, how does the safety and the effectiveness of this new booster, they call it bivalent because it targets both the original virus, the one that first came out worldwide, and it also targets the Omicron BA4 and BA5, which is what's causing almost all infections in the United States and around the world right now. So it includes specifically vaccination against those 2 strains. First one that does. So how's the effectiveness? How's the safety? Well, the safety looks like it's just as good as the original vaccine, which is a very safe vaccine. Yeah, there are rare problems, but way more rare problems than the problems from getting COVID. I mean, that killed millions of people around the world. So compared to just taking your chance with the virus, getting the vaccine is really a good idea for just about virtually everybody. The effectiveness, is this going to be more effective at preventing illness or preventing serious illness than the original vaccines that don't target BA4 and BA5? Well, it's a little bit hard to say. They did the human trials, but we don't have data on, 5 million or 10 million people getting this new booster compared to the old booster. We don't have the huge numbers to say how much better is it actually going to be. 6 months from now or 12 months from now, we'll be in a better position to say how much better this new booster targeting the strains that are currently circulating actually is. Should be better. I mean, rationally speaking, if it's targeting the variants that are circulating right now, it ought to be, but it's a little bit early to say absolutely it does and how much better does it do. So BA4, BA5, it's all around the world now. That's what everybody's getting. It's the most infectious, or those two are the most infectious strains that we've seen, but they're not causing nearly as many deaths as the original strain. Why? Well, it may be that these strains inherently aren't quite as potentially fatal as the original. In a way, if you're a virus and you want to propagate yourself, it's good not to kill your host, certainly not right away. You want your host to be alive to spread it to other hosts, and you want them to be alive to spread it to other hosts. If you just kill everybody that you infect with it, you don't spread as easily. So it could be that they're inherently less dangerous. But the other issue here is we've sort of achieved herd immunity now in the United States and in other countries too. we may have 85, 90% of the population at this point has either had the infection. Some of them don't even know they had it, but they did. Other ones maybe thought they had a cold. And then, some people got really sick and then recovered and they know they had it. But most of the population either had the virus or they had vaccination or both. They had both had the COVID and later got the vaccination, or they got vaccinated and, and later they got a case of COVID infection too. So we're no longer what we call naive to this virus. We already have some immunity to it. And you'll hear a lot of experts or reporters say, well, if you get the vaccine, after about 3 months, your immunity starts to wane. You can't don't take that too seriously. What they're talking about is the amount of antibody against COVID in the blood starts to drop after about 3 months. That doesn't mean you have no immunity against it. The body has two main types of immunity against harmful things, whether that's viruses or bacteria, molds, cancer cells, any kind of substances that do us bad. There's what's called humoral immunity. Humor just means fluid. So that's the antibodies that are present in the bloodstream and in the tissues, in the liquid in our bodies. So yeah, after about 3 months, you see the antibody levels in the bloodstream start to go down. But the other type of immunity, cellular immunity, and there's a number of different types of cells and a number of different mechanisms that they use to fight against invaders, including COVID. Those cells remember. So even if your detectable antibodies dropped a lot, and now you come in contact with COVID, okay, it might make more of an initial beachhead in your body than it would have if your antibody levels were way high. But your immune cells are going to see it and they're going to reactivate your body to fight the virus. So you're much better off than if you had never been exposed before. And that may be why we're not seeing nearly as many deaths from the current infections, Omicron, BA4, and BA5, because there's a lot of herd immunity now. Will we see a new, more deadly version of COVID suddenly appear in the future? Well, yeah, it's possible, but maybe not, or maybe not for a long time. There's only so many genes in the virus that, if they mutate, are really likely to make it more dangerous in one way or another. And we've seen lots of mutations already in those genes in various combinations. We've been through a lot of strains already. A lot of the strains just didn't make it. They didn't pan out. So they didn't spread very far. The big news strains were the original COVID. They went worldwide, killed millions of people. And then Delta was really bad. And now it's BA4, BA5 versions of Omicron, which, as I say, they're very contagious. But, in fact, in the last couple of months where I live, I know more people that got COVID in the last 2 months than in the previous almost 2.5 years put together. That's how much more infectious this BA4 and BA5 were than the other strains. And yet, nobody was hospitalized of these people I know. They went through their families. Basically, everybody in their household got sick, but nobody was hospitalized. Yeah, they felt kind of miserable for about a week. Maybe missed work or missed school, then they got over it. So influenza we can compare it to influenza. Influenza mutates every year, which is why every year they come out with a new influenza vaccination. They're trying to target the latest strain that seems to be the most successful. And yeah, and every year, hundreds of thousands, millions of people get influenza, and some die every year. Maybe we have 20,000 deaths in the United States from influenza, but we don't think of it as being a crisis. It's just something that has been around for longer than we have. Every once in a while, it manages to mutate so much that our immune cells hardly recognize it. That's when you have an influenza pandemic that can kill millions and millions of people. The worst one that we had is way back in 1918. We haven't had a really terrible influenza pandemic since then. We have some years that it's worse than other years, but nothing that's so radically different that it's our body doesn't recognize it. So this may be what we're looking at with COVID. We'll probably end up getting an annual vaccination targeting any new strains that have appeared, but might be a very long time, if at all, that we would see a variant that killed as many people as when it first came out. And humanity, it was a totally new virus to all of humanity. We had no defense against it. Now most people have been exposed. So what else did I want to say? There was a study just published in the latest issue of Journal of the American Medical Association, dated September 6, 2022. It wasn't a big study. In fact, it was just published as a letter to the editor, but came from Korea, South Korea. And they were trying to answer the question, does vaccination against the COVID virus help to prevent complications of coronary heart disease, like a heart attack, or stroke? Because we know that the COVID virus can cause clotting problems, including heart problems and strokes. The vaccines sometimes do too, but not nearly as often as the virus itself does. So in South Korea, they have universal health care, and they have pretty good data on the population. So they looked at two groups of people that did get COVID, they got infected. And the one group were people that had never been vaccinated against COVID. And the other group were people that had been considered fully vaccinated. So like they would have had 2 doses of Pfizer or 2 doses of Moderna or 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson or whatever they recommend. If they were using another vaccine that we don't have here in the United States, whatever the recommendation was, to consider yourself fully vaccinated. And they looked at what was the risk of getting coronary heart clot or a stroke in those two groups. And they said, yeah, the risk was lower in people that had been fully vaccinated compared to people that were never vaccinated. Now, this was I say it was almost 250,000 people that they looked at, 231,000 and something. So good size study. I'm afraid they did a lot of massaging of the data. I'm not sure if the vaccination was quite as effective at preventing those complications as they wanted to show. But I do see that it did reduce the risk of those complications. Of course, COVID causes a lot of other complications besides clots. The biggest cause of death is respiratory failure. right? And then there's other complications it causes too, multi-organ failure and long COVID and so on. But so that was the latest study I just saw, comparing vaccinated and unvaccinated people and specifically risk of clots. Again, I thought they did a little bit too much massaging of the data, but the vaccination was helpful. So that's all I have to say. I think for almost everybody, as I said this before, I'm saying it again, for almost everybody, it's a good idea to get vaccinated or get boosted. I think we're probably going to move to once a year. Fall is a good time. I decided I went and got mine yesterday because I'm planning to go to a conference next month. So I'll be around a whole bunch of people in an indoor space, and I'm likely to get exposed to the virus. This will be the first time I've been to a live conference since COVID first came out. So I thought, well, let me get this updated booster now. And then, of course, we got Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, and kids are go back to school, so it's a good time. Fall is a good time to get a booster for COVID. And if you're eligible, I would say, sure, take the booster that also covers against the variants that are circulating now, the BA4, BA5. That's all. Stay healthy, stay happy.